Hello everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a crucial area of law, statutory interpretation. With the rise of democracy, legislation has become the dominant source of English law. But what happens when laws are unclear? That's where statutory interpretation comes in. In this video, we'll break down the principles, rules, and approaches that courts use to interpret legislation. We'll be following the mind map on screen. So, let's get started. 1. Introduction. As the mind map shows, legislation now dominates English law. But simply passing a law isn't enough. Judges have to interpret statutes, and their approach greatly affects the outcome of a case. Why is this so important? Because the way a judge interprets a statute can be the difference between winning and losing a case. 2. Necessity of statutory interpretation. Statutory interpretation is necessary to resolve ambiguities in legislation and find its true meaning. Even seemingly simple words can have multiple meanings. Consider the classic case of Corkery v. Carpenter. The court had to decide whether a bicycle was a carriage under the Licensing Act of 1872. This shows how everyday terms can become points of legal contention. 3. Meaning of words. The meaning of words isn't always clear. This can be due to drafting issues, or the fact that words naturally have multiple meanings. This inherent ambiguity means that lawyers and judges must carefully interpret legal documents like statutes, contracts, and wills. 4. Interpretation. Problems of interpretation arise when deciding whether legislation applies to a particular set of facts. The modern approach focuses on giving effect to Parliament's purpose, reading provisions in the context of the statute as a whole and its historical context. A key example here is Quinterval v. Secretary of State for Health. This case demonstrates the importance of understanding the broader context when interpreting laws. 5. Rules of construction. Now, let's move on to the traditional rules of construction. These are traditional starting points for statutory interpretation, but they aren't binding rules. As the judgment in Quinterval shows, these rules are often now of historical interest. 6. The literal rule. The literal rule states that words must be given their plain, ordinary, and literal meaning. If the words are clear, they must be applied, even if the outcome seems harsh or the legislator's intention was different. Key cases illustrating this rule include Sussex peerage case, where the court emphasized the natural and ordinary sense of words, Whiteley v. Chappell, where a defendant was acquitted due to a literal interpretation, and London and North Eastern Railway Co. v. Berriman, where a widow was denied compensation due to a strict reading of the statute. 7. The Golden Rule. The Golden Rule is an adaptation of the literal rule. It says that if a literal interpretation leads to an absurd or obnoxious result, the court can modify the meaning to avoid that outcome. Examples of this include Gray v. Pearson, Adler v. George, R. v. Allen, and Rees Sigsworth. These cases show how courts can step in to prevent injustice or absurdity. 8. The Mischief Rule. The Mischief Rule requires the interpreter to ascertain the legislator's intention. This involves considering the state of the law before the statute, the mischief the statute intended to remedy, the remedy Parliament proposed, and the reason for that remedy. The cases of Royal College of Nursing v. DHSS, Electoral Commission v. Westminster Magistrates Court, and Smith v. Hughes are great examples of the mischief rule in action. 9. Engineering the result. It's worth noting a more cynical view, that judges sometimes choose a rule to justify a desired outcome. This raises questions about judicial impartiality and the potential for bias in statutory interpretation. 10. The purposive approach. The purposive approach is the modern style of interpreting statutes. Here, judges look at the reasons why a statute was passed and its overall purpose, even if it means moving away from the strict, ordinary meaning of the words. The case of test claimants in the FII Group litigation v. HMRC illustrates this approach, emphasizing the court's duty to favor interpretations that give effect to the legislation's purpose. 11. Rectification of a statute. Sometimes, statutes contain drafting errors. In these cases, courts may add words to resolve the error. The case of Inco Europe Limited v. First Choice Distribution provides an example of this. 12. EU Law and 13. Human Rights Act 1998. During the UK's membership in the EU, courts were required to use a purposive approach when interpreting EU-related legislation. Similarly, The Human Rights Act of 1998 mandates that legislation be compatible with convention rights. Litster v. Fourth Dry Dock exemplifies the EU law approach, while RVA No. 2 demonstrates the impact of the Human Rights Act. 14. Rules of language. Judges also use general principles known as rules of language. These include nociter associus. Words derive meaning from surrounding words. Iustum generis. General words are limited to the same type as specific words. Expressio unes est exclusio ulterius. Mentioning one thing excludes others. 15. Aids to interpretation. And 16. Presumptions. If the meaning of a statute is still unclear, courts can use aids to interpretation. These can be intrinsic, within the statute itself, or extrinsic, outside the statute, like Hansard. Courts also apply presumptions when interpreting legislation, though these can be rebutted with strong evidence. Summary. In summary, statutory interpretation is a complex but vital process. The courts now prefer a purposive approach, aiming to implement legislative intention and remedy absurdities in statutes. I hope this video has clarified the key principles of statutory interpretation. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.